He walked into his restaurant undercover. What two teens said behind him nearly shattered everything he built. You'd think owning a restaurant would mean you could stroll in any time and get a little recognition. A free meal, maybe. A few smiles. But Derrick Marshall wasn't looking for any of that. On that cloudy Tuesday afternoon in Birmingham, Alabama, he pulled his truck into the corner lot of Southern Edge, slid on a plain gray hoodie, tugged the brim of his baseball cap low, and walked in like a stranger. No security, no fanfare, no one rushing to greet him. He wanted to feel what his customers felt, to see what they saw, smell what they smelled, and maybe, if he was lucky, hear what they said when they didn't know who was listening. The lunch crowd had thinned. A couple of tables were still finishing up, some construction workers, two nurses from nearby Princeton Baptist. Derrick stood in line behind a woman juggling two kids and in front of two teenage girls, probably no older than 16. He kept his head down, scanning the menu posted above the counter, even though he knew it by heart. "You ever been here before?" one of the girls asked. "Yeah," the other replied. "My aunt says the food's decent, but the owner's just some rich dude who doesn't care about this part of town. Probably using it for a tax write-off." Derrick didn't flinch, didn't whip around or show his face, but something shifted in his chest, like the air got heavier, like someone had quietly scraped the soul out of his ribs. He kept looking up at the menu, pretending to think about sides. Collard greens or mac and cheese? As if it mattered. They kept talking. Nothing cruel. Just casual. Thoughtless. Honest. "I mean, the place looks nice, but it don't really feel like it's for us, you know?" That one stung. Because that's exactly who it was supposed to be for. Folks like them. Like his mother, his uncles, his late grandmother, Miss Reaney, who used to serve smothered pork chops and sweet tea on chipped porcelain plates to the neighborhood kids who didn't have dinner waiting at home. He remembered being 12, watching her cook from her tiny kitchen on 3rd Avenue West. No signs, no tips jars, just food and love and a plastic lawn chair for whoever showed up hungry. That spirit was supposed to live inside Southern Edge. But here he was, standing in the place he built from the ground up, listening to two teenagers talk about him like he was some faceless investor sitting in an office uptown, running numbers instead of recipes. "Mac and cheese, please," he told the cashier, handing over a 20. She didn't smile, didn't say welcome or thank you, just took the bill and slid his receipt across the counter. It wasn't rudeness, more like autopilot. He grabbed his cup, filled it with sweet tea and sat near the back, close enough to see the counter, far enough not to draw attention. The food came fast. Too fast, he thought. His plate didn't have that usual warmth, the kind that told you it had been handled with care. The cornbread was slightly burnt at the edges, the mac was dry. Not bad, just off, like someone going through the motions. From where he sat, he could hear the girls again. "Girl, you know what would be good? If this place had open mic nights or something. Or like art on the walls from kids around here. Yeah, that would be cool. Right now it just feels like nice, but boring." Derrick lowered his fork. Something about that hit harder than he expected. They weren't being hateful. They were just pointing out what he'd missed. He'd spent so long perfecting the food, polishing the branding, hiring the right staff, making sure the permits were in order, that he'd forgotten to stay close to the ground. To listen. To show up, not just as an owner, but as one of them. But what really got him, what stayed with him long after the girls were gone, was the simple fact that no one in that building recognized him. Not the cashier, not the cook who peeped through the kitchen window, not even the manager who walked past with a clipboard. Derrick didn't finish his plate. The mac and cheese that usually brought people back for seconds sat cold beside untouched greens. He looked around the room, not as a customer anymore, but as a man trying to understand where it all went sideways. Southern Edge was supposed to feel like family. Like sitting in your auntie's living room on a Sunday, hearing Al Green playing low in the background while somebody's baby cried in the hallway. But right now, it felt distant, polished, safe, almost too clean, like someone had tried too hard to make it welcoming, and forgot what made it feel alive in the first place. He leaned back in his chair, watching the girls gather their takeout and leave. They didn't look back. The dining room wasn't empty, but it sure felt like it. And in that silence, his mind drifted. Back to the beginning. Back to the tiny duplex he grew up in near Ensley, where dreams had to fight for air. He remembered lying on the couch at night, while his mom counted coins at the kitchen table, trying to stretch $30 for the week. "Don't worry about it, baby," she used to say. "We've got what matters." But what mattered most to Derrick was food. The way it brought people together, even when nothing else did. His grandma, Miss Reaney, was the heartbeat of it all. She never talked about business plans or branding. She just knew how to feed people. And when she died, Derrick promised himself he'd carry her spirit forward. So, after 15 years in tech, a couple of startups under his belt, and one buyout that made him a millionaire overnight, he walked away. Not because he had to, but because something in him said it was time to go home. Southern Edge was supposed to be his tribute, to Miss Reaney, to his block, to every plate of oxtails that ever made a bad day better. But now, he was questioning everything. The manager, Cynthia Barrow, early 30s, sharp, efficient, had come highly recommended. She ran a tight ship, knew how to control food costs, kept the books clean. But maybe clean wasn't enough. Maybe clean was the problem. Derrick stood, tossed his barely touched plate, and walked outside. The sky was darkening with that early Alabama dusk. Just enough wind to make your jacket matter. He sat on the tailgate of his truck, staring at the building like he'd never seen it before. The red brick facade, the sleek new awning, the carefully designed logo that had cost him $4,000. It all looked good. But good didn't mean anything if people didn't feel seen inside. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through old photos. One of Miss Reaney in her apron, holding a ladle like a queen with her scepter. Another of him, at 14, grinning over a pot of greens she'd let him stir for the first time. "You're not just feeding stomachs," she used to say. "You're feeding hearts." Don't forget that. But maybe he had. A text popped up on his screen. From his assistant, Shauna. Shauna. "Board wants to confirm Thursday for the panel in Mobile. Also, Channel 6 wants to feature you next week. Black Business Spotlight." Derrick stared at the message. A year ago, that would have lit him up. The attention, the recognition. But now, sitting there outside the very place he'd dreamed into existence, it all felt hollow. Because what good was a spotlight if the people you built it for didn't feel the warmth? He locked his phone and slid it back into his pocket. He wasn't going to respond. Not yet. Inside, the restaurant was still moving. Servers wiping down tables, cooks preparing for the dinner shift. Cynthia's voice carried lightly as she spoke to a waiter about inventory. Nothing seemed out of order. Everything ran smooth, too smooth. Derrick jumped down from the tailgate and walked back inside, not to eat, not to hide, but to start asking questions. But before he said a word, he paused, realizing he couldn't fix anything until he saw it, all of it, for what it really was. He waited by the side hallway, just out of the staff's direct view. Watched. Listened. A busser, no older than 19, came out the kitchen with a tub of dishes. He moved like he was chasing the clock, eyes low, sleeves rolled up. Behind him, the line cook was arguing with someone over a missing delivery ticket. There was tension in the air, not enough to blow up, but enough to notice. Derrick took a breath and stepped in. Cynthia spotted him first. Her brows furrowed for a split second, then she straightened up and gave him the kind of smile that said, "I wasn't expecting this." She walked over, wiping her hands on a side towel. "Mr. Marshall," she said, her voice polite but clipped. "Didn't know you were coming by today. Just wanted to see things from the other side of the counter," Derrick said. "Figured I'd stop in like any regular customer. Everything all right?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out." She glanced towards the kitchen, then back at him. "Is there something I should know?" He hesitated. Now wasn't the time to unload everything. Not yet. I overheard some guests talking. Young girls. They didn't know who I was. Cynthia nodded slowly, waiting. They said this place didn't feel like it was for them. That maybe I opened it for a tax break. Cynthia blinked, surprised. That's not how we present it. Everyone knows this place is locally owned. Knowing and feeling are two different things. For the first time, she didn't have a ready answer. He scanned the dining area again. The layout was sleek. Black and white photos of famous black musicians lined the walls. The playlist was curated jazz and neo-soul. The lighting was warm, the table spotless, but something still felt disconnected. I'm not saying anything's wrong with the look, he continued. It's clean, professional, but it's missing that thing. The heartbeat. Cynthia crossed her arms, still listening. Derrick appreciated that about her. She didn't argue just to argue. Do you know the names of those girls who just left? He asked. No, sir. I don't think they come here often. I'd like to change that. She raised an eyebrow. You want me to reach out to them? He shook his head. I want to start listening better. I think we've been managing this place more like a business than a home, Cynthia sighed. That's not unfair. Derrick turned to the kitchen. Mind if I talk to the crew? Be my guest, she said, stepping aside. Inside the air was hotter, busier, grease popping, pans clanking, people moving fast. A cook named Antoine, tall, solid in his mid-40s, was wiping down his station. Antoine, Derrick said. Got a minute? He looked up, surprised. Hey, Mr. Marshall, what's going on? Just checking in. How's everything going back here? Antoine wiped his hands. Same as always, tight on prep time, orders piling up, folks calling out again. You feel like the team's still connected to the reason we started this place? Antoine paused, chewing on the question. Honestly, not really, he said. People just trying to get through the day. Ain't like how it was the first few months. Derrick nodded. Why do you think that is? Could be a lot of things. Staff changes. Pressure to be perfect. Folks forget this ain't just a job. It's supposed to mean something. That line stuck. Supposed to mean something. Derrick left the kitchen deep in thought. The more he peeled back, the more he saw that the machine still worked, but it had lost its soul. Somewhere between scaling up and keeping up, the place had shifted. People weren't just feeding customers, they were clocking hours. But if he wanted to bring back what made Southern Edge matter, he couldn't just tweak the menu or switch up the music. He'd have to reset the whole rhythm of the place. The next morning, Derrick didn't head to his office. He didn't check his email or take calls. Instead, he parked a block away from the restaurant, walked the neighborhood, and talked to people. He started with the barber shop 2 doors down, Jerome's Fades and Styles. Jerome had been cutting hair on that block for nearly 20 years. The kind of guy who always knew what was going on, even if nobody told him directly. Jerome was in the middle of a lineup when Derrick walked in. Look who finally decided to visit, he said, half joking. The ghost of 14th Street. Derrick laughed under his breath. I deserved that. Jerome waved him to the waiting bench. You good? Trying to be, Derrick replied. Wanted to ask you something. Shoot. You ever hear folks say Southern Edge doesn't feel like it's for them? Jerome didn't answer right away. He tilted his client's chin, adjusted the clippers, and finished his pass before turning off the buzzing and looking straight at Derrick. I've heard things. Not from everybody. But yeah, some folks feel like it got too pretty. Too polished. Like they got to clean up just to come inside. That hit hard. Derrick leaned forward, elbows on knees. That was never the goal. I know that, Jerome said. But sometimes intention ain't what people feel. And feelings stick. The shop stayed quiet after that. Only the soft snip of scissors and the low hum of conversation. Derrick left with a handshake and a promise to do better. But he wasn't done. Next, he stopped by a small community center a few blocks over. Inside, a group of high schoolers was working on a mural project. Bright colors, bold lines, images of local landmarks and faces. He introduced himself to the woman running the program, Monica Delaney, mid-50s, wore a denim shirt with paint stains, and had hands that looked like they'd been building things her whole life. "Oh, I know who you are," she said with a warm, almost maternal tone. "Derrick Marshall. I remember when you were talking about opening that restaurant. You came to the church and everything." He smiled, a little embarrassed. "That feels like forever ago." "It's only been a few years," she said. "But a lot can change in that time." He walked over to the kids. "You all ever been to Southern Edge?" One of the teens, a girl with long braids and sharp eyes, shrugged. "My mom said it's too pricey. Said it ain't like what she remembers." Another boy chimed in. "We walk by it every day after school. Looks cool. Just don't feel like it's our spot, you know?" That phrase again. Our spot. Derrick stayed quiet, letting it sink in. Later that evening, back inside the restaurant, he called an impromptu meeting. Staff from every shift gathered in the dining room. Cooks, servers, hosts, dishwashers. Some leaned against walls, others sat at tables. Everyone looked confused, curious. Derrick stood at the front, no notes, no prepped speech. "I heard something yesterday," he began. "From two girls who came in for takeout. They said Southern Edge didn't feel like it was for them." A murmur rolled through the room. "I went walking this morning, talked to folks. Some agreed, some didn't. But one thing's clear. We're not as connected to this neighborhood as we should be." He looked around the room, meeting as many eyes as he could. "I don't want this place to just survive. I want it to matter. But that won't happen if we're treating people like transactions instead of neighbors." One of the servers, a younger guy named Trey, raised his hand. "Can I say something?" "Go ahead." Trey shifted in his chair. "Sometimes I don't know how much we're allowed to care. Like, we're trained to be efficient. Quick, polite, but not real. Like, if I stop to talk to someone, I feel like I'm slowing things down." Cynthia spoke up next. "That's on me. I pushed efficiency. I thought it made us stronger." Derrick nodded. "You weren't wrong. But we've got to find a way to be fast and real, friendly and human. Because if we don't, we'll lose the thing that made this place special in the first place." He paused, scanning the room one more time. "We're going to make some changes. But it starts with listening." But listening was only the first step. What mattered now was what he chose to do next. 3 days later, the sign on the front window looked different. Instead of the usual hours and specials, there was a handwritten note taped to the glass. Just one sentence. "We're hosting a community table. Sunday at 4. No cameras, no speeches, just food and conversation." No one really knew what to expect. By 3:45, folks started showing up. Some came out of curiosity. Others because their neighbor told them about it. Word had spread, quietly but quickly, through barbershops, churches, group chats, and corner stores. By 4:05, Southern Edge was full. There was no host stand, no servers taking orders. Just long tables lined with trays of food. Fried chicken, black-eyed peas, catfish, greens, sweet potatoes, banana pudding, sweet tea in pitchers. It was everything Miss Reaney would have made, and then some. Derrick stood behind the line, helping to serve. Not because it was symbolic, but because it was necessary. People were hesitant at first. It took time, but once the plates were full and mouths were moving, something shifted. The sound of clinking silverware and soft conversation grew louder, then warmer. "I used to live down the street," one woman said between bites. "Moved when the rent went up. Still miss it. Used to be you'd walk into a place and know half the room." A man with calloused hands and paint-streaked pants nodded. "It ain't just about food. It's about walking into a place and feeling seen." Derrick sat at the table beside them, eating like everybody else. No introductions, no explanations. Then a teenager spoke up. Same girl from the mural project. Her name was Kiara. "This food's good," she said, grinning. "Way better than I expected." A few people laughed. But real talk, she added. When your first opened, I thought it was going to be like one of those fake urban spots. You know the kind, all vibes, no roots. She looked at Derrick straight on. But this? This feels different. He didn't say much, just smiled. Because sometimes you don't need a speech. You just need a full table. Later, Monica from the mural program stood and clinked her glass. I want to say something, she said. I've lived in this neighborhood most of my life. I've seen things come and go. Restaurants, developers, politicians. But what matters most is who stays, who listens. She looked around. And tonight, it feels like somebody finally listened. A quiet hum of agreement passed through the room. Jerome from the barbershop leaned back in his chair and gave Derrick a nod. This time, it didn't feel like a jab. It felt like respect. After dessert, folks stayed behind. Some helped clean. Others just sat and talked. It wasn't flashy. No media coverage, no influencer tags. But it was real. Later that night, as Derrick walked through the empty dining room, the smell of fried food still hanging in the air, he paused by the front window. The note was still there, curling slightly at the corners. He pulled it down, folded it neatly, and tucked it into his wallet. Not as a keepsake, but as a reminder. He turned to Cynthia, who was stacking chairs. What if we did this once a month? She nodded. I think people would come, and not just for the food. No, she said, not just for the food. He looked around the room, then back at her. Let's keep the tables long, Cynthia raised a brow. You serious? Yeah, he said. No more rows of 2s and 4s. Let's make people sit together. Even if it's awkward. People hate awkward. They also hate feeling alone. But he knew now, real connection only came when people stopped playing it safe. And maybe, just maybe, a little awkward was exactly what they needed. By the following week, everything started to look different, even if the building hadn't changed a bit. Gone were the sleek, Instagram-perfect table settings and the overly curated jazz playlist. In their place, a mix of old-school records and local live recordings. The playlist wasn't built by a branding agency. It was crafted by Antoine and a few of the kitchen staff who'd been burning CDs long before streaming was a thing. The art on the walls? Swapped out. Cynthia had reached out to a nearby high school, and the response was instant. Students from Carver High flooded in with pieces. Portraits, collages, murals, poems written in Sharpie on canvas. Nothing polished, nothing corporate, just raw, honest work from kids who walked the same sidewalks Derrick once did. And then came the mic. A cheap PA system. A single standing mic. Every Thursday evening, just before closing, Southern Edge became a voice box. Poetry, storytelling, local musicians, even a retired mechanic who recited his grandmother's recipes like scripture. People showed up for it. They packed the place. Not because it was trendy, but because it finally sounded like them. But it wasn't just the community that changed. The staff shifted too. Trey, the quiet server who once felt like he had to hold back, had turned into a natural greeter. He didn't fake smiles. He didn't rush. He asked people how their day was, and waited for the answer. In the kitchen, Antoine started inviting younger team members to help with recipe testing on Sunday nights. It wasn't part of the job description. He didn't get paid extra. But he said it made him remember why he fell in love with cooking in the first place. Even Cynthia, who once measured everything in charts and cost margins, started showing up differently. She greeted guests by name, shared meals with the team. Her clipboard didn't disappear, but it spent more time resting on the counter than clutched in her hands. Derrick noticed all of it. And instead of micromanaging or writing memos, he stayed close, not hovering, just present, sitting at the back table during lunch rush, holding the door open when a customer left, scrubbing trays on busy nights. He didn't do it for show. He did it because he finally understood. Being a founder wasn't about stepping back once the doors opened. It was about staying in the thick of it, where the real stuff happened. Still, not everyone loved the new direction. A few regulars who had come for the refined soul food experience stopped showing up. One even left a review online calling it too casual and no longer upscale. Derrick read it, let it sit, then closed the app. Because he knew soul food wasn't born in silence and white linens. It was born in rooms full of voices, seasoning and laughter. It was supposed to be messy, loud, alive. And business? Business got better. Revenue didn't just recover, it grew. Word of mouth replaced ad campaigns. New customers showed up weekly. Some locals, some visitors passing through town who had heard about that spot in Birmingham where folks eat at long tables and read poetry while waiting for fried okra. More importantly, the people who once walked past Southern Edge without stopping were now pulling up chairs inside. One afternoon, while refilling the tea dispenser, Derrick caught sight of Kiara, the teen from the mural project, sitting near the window with two friends. They were laughing, eating, and pointing at a painting one of them had done that now hung proudly above table 6. She caught his eye, lifted her glass slightly, and grinned. He raised his cup back. No words exchanged. None needed. But as he stood there, watching the restaurant breathe in a whole new way, Derrick realized the legacy he'd been chasing was never about a name or a brand. It was about making people feel like they belonged, even when they didn't expect to. It wasn't until months later, during a late Saturday cleanup, that it all came full circle. The dinner crowd had cleared out. Chairs were stacked, floors mopped, and the last few staff members were laughing in the back, waiting on Antoine to finish frying up what he called his midnight hush puppies. Derrick was wiping down the last table when Cynthia walked over, holding a crumpled piece of paper. "Found this under the window seat," she said. "Thought you'd want to see it." He unfolded it. It was a note. Sloppy handwriting, folded twice, like someone had planned to throw it away but couldn't. "My mom brought me here today for the first time. I thought it was going to feel fake, like other places. But I saw my painting on the wall, and I saw people like me laughing, talking, feeling full. I want to work here one day. No name, no signature. Just those words." Derrick sat down hard in the nearest chair. He read it twice, then again, and he didn't move for a while. Because that was the real return. Not profit margins, not local awards, not write-ups in city magazines, but that anonymous note from a kid who came in expecting nothing and left wanting to be part of it. He tucked it into his wallet next to the folded flyer from the first community dinner. 2 reminders, one of what he nearly missed and one of what he finally reclaimed. A week later, Derrick was asked to speak at a local entrepreneur event at Lawson State. He almost said no, but Cynthia insisted. "Not everyone needs to hear how you built it," she told him. "Some folks need to hear what you fixed." So he stood in front of a small crowd of business hopefuls, some fresh out of school, others switching paths in midlife, and shared what nobody talks about in startup circles. "I built Southern Edge with all the right intentions," he told them. "I wanted to honor my family, my neighborhood, my past. I got the location, the capital, the branding. But I forgot the most important part." He paused, letting the silence carry weight. "I forgot to keep showing up, not just in name but in spirit. I forgot that people don't connect to perfection. They connect to presence." One hand went up. A young man in the second row. "How do you know when you've got it right?" Derrick smiled. "You don't. You just stay close enough to notice when you've gotten it wrong, and humble enough to fix it." The room stayed quiet, thoughtful. When it was over, a few students came up to shake his hand, ask questions. One woman said she was going to stop delaying her dream of opening a bakery in her neighborhood. Another said she'd been afraid of making it too local. Until now, Derrick walked back to his truck that night, feeling something he hadn't felt in a long time. Not pride, peace. Because the truth was, success had never been about the sleek logo or the packed seating on weekends. It was about staying in conversation, with the people, with the place, with the reason it all started. That Sunday, Derrick stood behind the counter again. Not as a guest, not undercover, but fully present. He greeted every customer by name if he could. He made sure new faces got more than just a menu. They got a seat at the long table, too, and when Kiara brought in her younger cousin to show off her painting, Derrick stepped out from behind the line, introduced himself properly, and asked if she ever thought about working weekends once she turned 16. Her eyes lit up. "You serious?" "I don't offer jobs I don't mean," he said. The kid next to her whispered, "Yo, that's the owner?" Kiara nodded, proud. "Yeah, and he's actually here, because in the end, the lesson wasn't about food or profits. It was about showing up, listening when it's hard, and choosing every day to make the space a little more honest, a little more human. If this story meant something to you, share it. Let someone else hear what's possible when pride gives way to presence. And if you've built something, anything, don't forget to stay close enough to feel when it needs your heart, not just your hands. Subscribe for more real stories like this one.